Welcome back to The Therapist's Invitation. We are so glad that you're here. I'm Trevor, and I'm joined, as always,
by Mark.
And if you have not already purchased Dr. Mayfield's book, I highly recommend it, called The Path Out of Loneliness. He may not say as much, but it is an exceptional piece of work and out of an incredible amount of timing for where we are just as a society and a culture and a world with all that's been happening in the past couple of years. And so definitely food for thought, even if you're thinking that you aren't lonely and you don't have any problems with that. That's okay. How can you help somebody else?
Good book. I enjoyed writing it. I'm glad it's out.
And I think, with the book idea, you put a lot of work into the book. And you did a lot of market research to see what was out there and realized maybe not much. And what was out there, you studied and kind of took into consideration, what is the quality? What is the intent? What is the audience that we're focused on? And I think that our conversation today could lean towards disregarding all of that work. And I want to be really clear that that's not the point.
No.
Because all of those things for your book specifically were so important and so vital to the creation of this thing that you put effort into. And so we would be remiss to not look around us a little bit,
right,
and to understand where we are. But I think that has a season, because I wonder for you, as you were writing the book, let's say you got to like chapter 5, or maybe even part 2.
Wait, there's 5 chapters?
Or part 2, where you were looking at more of the historical context of loneliness. Were you doing that same level of market research? Like, who's written about loneliness, who's contemporary to this conversation, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I did it all the way through, all 3 parts. I think it was an interesting experience. I think it was really affirming for me, and this might take us off track of where I know you want to go with this.
It's all good. I love it.
But I think it was really affirming for me because there was nothing really out there from a mind, body, spirit perspective.
Yeah.
And so I really feel like my book is the kind of the initial work on the integration of mind, body, spirit when it comes to this conversation around loneliness.
Yeah.
But I think when I was looking, it was always kind of a tentative look, because I'm curious of who's got a better definition of loneliness, and who's got a better, did a better survey, or, so I think, I know where you want to go with this conversation of just, the comparison model of things. I think is, it can be, I think I'm stuck in that right now. So as we sit here and talk about this, I know we talked about this over lunch today.
Yeah.
Is writing something that is really from the depths of my heart and my soul and my cognition.
Yeah.
Putting that out there to everyone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's at Amazon, it's in Barnes and Noble, it's in Walmart, it's in Christian booksellers, it's at, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Will it do well?
Mm-hmm. And what does that mean about you?
What does that mean about me?
Totally.
I think is the vulnerable producing question.
Yeah.
And I think that's a question that all of us ask at different stages of our life. I mean, I can remember being a youth pastor and like driving by a different church on the night that they had youth group to see how many cars were in the parking lot, and comparing that to how many cars I had in the parking lot. I was in my 20s. I'm looking now, I'll be 40 here shortly. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, and
I missed out on so much because I was so worried about how I compared to others.
Well, and you keep saying that it doesn't lead to where I want it to lead. This idea that throughout your book writing process, you were doing those comparisons. But I think it's actually more meaningful, because we might be talking about 2 different things here, where you going to the other parking lots, how does that inform the work that you're doing?
That's pretty creepy, by the way, to think about.
A little bit.
Just going to put that out there 20 years later. A little creepy,
But at best, let's say you have 20 cars in your parking lot. They have 80 cars in theirs. That's probably where the information ends.
Oh, sure. And it doesn't tell me much.
No, you don't have anything to work on. Whereas in the process of writing your book, you're able to see this book that did very well. And what did they write? What publisher did they like? You're able to get more information. And I think that that's the important part, is the information that allows us to do better. But then when we start doing the comparison, it doesn't, I think, drive us to improve. Because I think there's a big difference too in, I've talked about this before, condemnation and conviction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that oftentimes comparison is just going to lead to condemnation, but not ever really conviction.
No. Was I being a better youth pastor because I was going to the parking lot to see how many cars were in there?
No, probably the opposite.
Sure.
I would argue. Like,
yep.
There's an element of that I think we have to be able to acknowledge in ourselves of, when is this actually helpful? And maybe what does that even look like? And when is this so not helpful for me?
Well, for example, somebody that I admire greatly.
Yeah.
You'll know who this is once you read my book. So pick up the book, you'll know who it is. Somebody I admire greatly wrote my foreword.
Yeah.
Like, the dude is smart.
Yep.
Like, smarter than me.
And accomplished.
And I'm super honored that he wrote my foreword. He's got a book coming out a month later than mine.
Yeah.
Not on the same topic, but on similar veins.
Yeah.
I had a glimpse of selfishness going, I hope my book does better. Going, wait, what? No, it's not about that.
Yeah.
And I had to come back to, that was the conviction condemnation conversation.
Yeah.
I came back to, why did I write this book in the first place? I wrote this book because I was being obedient to the message that was instilled in me by God.
Yep.
And I had to be faithful to that because it was eating me alive.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote the book.
Not so that you could do better.
Not that I could do better than so-and-so.
Yeah. And
we talked about that at lunch today, where there's a part of us that hopes the book doesn't do well, so life can just kind of go on as normal.
Right.
But it goes back to the message that I have about creating common language around our mental health experience, creating common language around our relational experience.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote this book on loneliness. And I really do hope it gets in the hands of millions of people.
Yeah.
Not so that it will do well,
right,
but because the message needs to be heard by people.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting
and maybe that
place to be.
Maybe you touched on like that difference of, maybe the difference is just how we are responding to what we're doing. So, you know, in that drive, we're picking on you a lot today, apparently. In that drive to the other youth groups, it was condemnation. Mm-hmm. You're not doing as well. They're doing better than you. You're a terrible, blah, blah, all those thoughts, right?
I'm not as popular.
You're not as popular. People don't like you as much as that youth pass. Like, all of those questions would arise. Whereas maybe with the book, there was a touch of that, but then it became conviction of, no, let me remind myself of the why that I'm doing this and let that drive us. Because I think the condemnation shuts us down and the conviction drives us.
Well, sure. And then if you open up the leaflet in my book and you I had to sit, I actually was sitting in my office when I got the books in person a couple of days ago, and just started crying because I looked at the people that gave endorsements for this book. I'm an unknown. Nobody knows me.
Right.
It's my first real book.
Right.
You know,
quotations
real book. And yet they saw the value in the message.
Yeah.
And they wanted to get behind that.
Yeah.
That to me creates more conviction about the message and about why we're doing what we're doing. And I could really care less beyond that. And I'm honestly saying that.
Yep, right.
But if if anybody knows me that's listening, that's not always been the way I've been. And I know you haven't either.
No,
right?
totally.
I mean, we had this conversation about counseling centers in Colorado Springs a couple months ago.
Yep.
And
I've had these conversations about videography and production, and it's so easy to look at individual, especially on YouTube. I'm gonna point towards somebody I've talked about before. I think Peter McKinnon has an amazing heart, and he's a forerunner on YouTube for videographers. And it's so easy for me, in probably unhealth is really the difference for me, to watch his videos and compare and say, he's so much better than I am. I've been doing this for X amount of time. I should be better. All of this stuff. And that's just the comparison. That's the condemnation. That's the, you're not good enough.
Right.
But then other times, and one of the reasons I really love what Peter McKinnon does is I go to those videos in health and they inform the work that I'm doing. They show me the things I can grow in.
Let me pick on you for a minute.
Yeah, go for it.
Remember a couple years ago?
I do.
When I hired a videographer for our for our fundraising event.
I do. Because I couldn't make it scheduling.
You couldn't make it scheduling.
Right.
We would have gone with you, I think, first. But I remember just the conversations we had. And I know it was a sensitive moment and you were working through things.
Yeah.
But, I wonder what you were feeling in those moments of, wait a second.
Totally. Yeah. It was
so much good enough or why,
Totally. There was so much of that condemnation and so much of my own pride, which I think has a huge element here.
Oh, gosh, mine gets in the way all the time.
Because it was all about what was wrong with me and what I perceived to be better about this other person. And looking back on it, there are things that I learned from that engagement that I still use today. And there are so many other things that I could have learned, regardless of that person's skill above mine. There's so much that I could have learned in that moment that I missed out on because of the condemnation and the comparison. And probably just because my pride got in the way and it started getting hurt and it was unwilling to work out of conviction because and I think at that point, especially, I didn't really know why.
Well, right. It rises up in that, I think the pride rises up in that I know what I know and nobody else needs to tell me otherwise.
Right.
And I've got this.
Yeah.
I'm good enough.
Totally.
And I think it's just, I know, at least in myself, I'm not going to superimpose this on you, but I know in myself, it's just my insecurities coming up in a way that is trying to protect them.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
100%.
And so are my feelings that I really want this book to do well because it's a reflection on me, are they bad? No, they're not, because I put my hands to something that I really believe in and it's really important. Blood, sweat, and tears, literally.
Yeah.
That's not bad in and of itself.
Right.
But if I put it up next to somebody else or something else.
Or even if you allow the success of the book to mean something about your value.
Yes.
That is unhealthy.
Right.
But to look at the success of your book and see that just by it being published says something about the work that you put into it.
My wife reminded me the other day, that was one of my bucket lists.
Yeah.
To be a published author.
Yep.
And she goes, you checked it off.
Right.
You didn't have any goals about selling 1 million copies. You had no goals about this or that. You had a goal of becoming a published author.
And I would argue it is just as unhealthy for you to associate a failure to the book to your identity and your value.
Exactly.
As it would be if you became the most well-known book second to the Bible and use that to say something about your identity and value. No. Both are equally as unhealthy.
Yes. Our value, and I think this is where comparison comes from, is that our value is not, comparison comes out of a value that's not rooted in security and in answering the question, who am I? Whose am I? Yeah. Where do I belong? Where's my tribe? Who's my cult? All those types of things I think are really important conversations to have. And so we're going to go back and forth to comparison. Yeah. Going back to when we started Mayfield Counseling Centers almost 7 years, six and a half years ago, 6 years ago, we were like, wow, we're going to be the biggest counseling center in last 2 years. I'm like, no,
that doesn't sound great.
That doesn't sound fun at all. Let's just do the best we can with what we've been given and be faithful to what, but I remember some of the times that we've lost, you and I had, you've been on this journey with me for almost 5 of those 6 years, or if not 5 now.
It has been 5 of the past 6. And I actually met you 2 months before you opened doors.
That's right.
On Mayfield.
Yes, that's right. So you've been on the journey, and how much sleep did we lose? Yeah. How much weight did we gain? How much, how much unhealth was in there?
You gained all the gray hair. I got none of it.
Yep.
I wish I could have.
You'll get there.
But yeah, it's been stressful. It's been hard. It's been brutal.
But this last 10 months, 12 months, 9 months, were we almost 9 months?
Yeah, almost 9 months.
It's been such a breath of fresh air. We're like, you know what? Here's what we have been tasked with.
And we're going to do it well. And this new shiny counseling center that just opened a $1.1 million building,
That's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah. And good for them. Like, that's good for the city. That's good for
I
them.
have no desire
Right.
to manage that or to keep track of any of that.
And one of the initiating conversations for this season of the Therapist Invitation was a comparison to another group in town. And what I think we both had was initial reactions of unhealth and comparison and condemnation that then became healthy responses of conviction. Because I remember thinking, they don't have me. And so how can I do the best work I can where I am?
Yep.
Just knowing that this is where I am and this is what I can do, and that it's good, and that, you know, regardless of the comparison piece, there is maybe also an element of like, they don't have me. Well, and that's a boon for us.
Well, I love that because it adds value where value needs to be placed.
Yeah.
You know, we've had this conversation of staff coming and going, and grass is greener on the other side, and all that kind of stuff. I think this plays into that, is that we have to strive for a content heart where we're at. There's nothing wrong with going, ooh, what they got going on over there? Yeah. That sounds interesting. Is there anything that we should be paying attention to?
It's the difference of...
But I'm content with where I'm at. Yeah. And I think that's where... I don't know how many discontented therapists that you've met in your life because of where they're at. They're always looking for the
next thing.
The next thing, or they're finding the wrong things.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I'm guilty of that.
I think every single human being is.
Right? Yeah. But it's going, no, let's just, like, what do we got?
Yeah.
We're sitting in a studio right now.
Well, and I think
we're... I don't know.
There might be a difference, too, of seeing the other youth group as you're driving on to work and actively pursuing them.
Sure.
Like it's not bad for you to look.
No.
It's not even bad for you to count the cars.
No.
I think
driving out of my way to do it. That's fun.
That's where
it's a little creepy.
That's where we've reached a point of unhealth and condemnation, and we're starting to add things to it that really don't belong there.
Right.
And I think one of the things that's really valuable over the past 6 years is that you and I have built a relationship where we can call out some of that, and we can share those things really comfortably. And I would say, you know, we have this ability in our own relationship to be able to have vulnerable and intimate conversations pretty casually, and to push in when we have to, and to allow it to be comfortable and all of those things. And without that, I think I know for a fact that I would have struggled more in so many areas of my own development professionally and personally, because I need to have, and I think every person needs to have, multiple people in their lives that are able to speak into those moments of comparison, and not just to say, you're comparing yourself, stop it, but to say, no, that's not where your value lies. Let's change the entirety of the conversation, because that's not the conversation.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think just for our listeners then to really take stock of, like, where is this comparison condemnation piece, you know, like creeping into your life? Yeah. I've got to take a step back quite often and reflect on that. And
it doesn't go away.
No. And I think, how much of life are you missing out on of just being present in those moments with family, with friends, with your career, with your job, with whatever that might be? Yeah. The car you're driving. Yeah. The house you live in, the clothes you wear. I mean, we could go down to the nth degree that we can compare ourselves on everything. Yeah. Instead of going, no, I'm pretty content.
I remember, I mean, I've talked about this on this podcast before. I'm very car blind.
Yeah, you are.
I just, like, I can maybe tell the difference between a car and an SUV, and I can tell the difference between those and a truck. Apart from that, not much. Like, it's hard.
It's a painful, guys. Just so you know, it's painful.
Yeah, Mark struggles with it. But like, so it's hard for me with cars, but I do still engage in some of the, like, if I used to drive. Do you remember the Pontiac Grand Am?
How could I forget that?
Yeah, Milo.
It was that in your truck, and we were just wondering which one was going to die
Totally.
the first time.
It was my wife's car that I inherited to commute with, and it was like on its third engine and all sorts of stuff. And I can remember there was a phase where there were a lot of people in my lives upgrading their vehicles. And whenever I would park somewhere, everybody's car was nicer. Even from my car blindness perspective,
You saw that.
I could see it. So it was probably really bad to everybody else. But I remember distinctly having some meaningful conversations with you and engaging in it in like podcasts and stuff about this idea of being content, and that there's literally nothing you need to be content. It is just a decision that you have to make in a process in yourself. You're not going to get one more thing and be content. Like, that's just not how it works. And I can remember feeling so content in Milo for a good long time. And unfortunately, we got rid of him about a month later. So it was really only a month where I was like so content.
Didn't you donate him to like us?
We donated him back to the school that Bree bought it from. Yeah. But I felt so content and I felt so at peace, and I would be able to park next to anyone. And there wasn't this moment of like shame or embarrassment or anything. It was just this sense of like, this is my car and I'm really grateful that I have it. And I'm glad that it is consistent. And I'm glad that I know its oddities and I know how to drive it well. And I know what things to do if it's not. And it was just this sense of gratitude and peace and contentedness that I would argue surpassed even what I have now with the nice car that we replaced him with. And there's so many times that I want to just be able to return to that mindset in whatever I'm doing, where I'm okay. It's okay. I can grow and change, and I can trade in that car, but not because I'm ashamed of it, not because I don't find value, not because of anything other than that's growth.
Right. Yeah. Progress. Move forward.
Development.
Take stock of where you're at. And lean in, press in, ask the hard questions. I think that's why we talk about this kind of stuff on this podcast. So give us feedback. Let us know what you think, what you want to hear. I think we have like 42,500 listens, which is super exceeded anything that we ever expected. So thank you for staying in there and hanging in there with us, and look forward to talking more.